In this video, we're going to talk about graph mapper. So let's search graph mapper. And to use graph mapper, let's create a range of numbers. For the domain, let's use 0 to 1 and using 10 steps. So you'll see that there are 11 values from 0, 0 0.1, 0 0.2, 0 0.3, and all the way to 1 at 0 0.1 increment. So let's connect the range of numbers to the graph mapper and right click on the graph mapper. You'll see that there are graph types you can choose from. Let's use a Bezier. So Bezier curve, basically you have a 4 points. You have a start point, end point, and 2 control points. By dragging the control points, you can shape the Bezier curve the way you want. Now we have an output from the graph mapper that is also 11 numbers from 0 to 1, but it is not at 0 0.1 interval anymore. So this means that when we have initial input numbers values from 0 to 1 at 0 0.1 interval, on x-axis, the value is 0, the y output is also 0, but when x is 0 0.1, which is here, then you trace it along y-axis, and when it hits on the curve, you read out the y value. So in this case, about 0.35, somewhere here, right? You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, so 0.35. So you can see that it's a 0.37 something. And when x input is 0.2, from here, you move along y-axis, and when it hits the graph, you read out the y value here. That is about 0.55. So you can see that it is actual value is 0.57. To visualize this, we can create a list of points using the input and output as x and y value of the points. So when you connect range values into x and the output of the graph mapper as y, you'll see that there's a list of points that mimics the curve of the graph mapper. I can change the graph mapper and the points on my Rhino screen also changes. We can use the graph mapper to create a geometry like what you see on my Rhino screen. So to build this geometry, let's start with a new document. Let's start with a circle CNR, which means center normal radius. And we'll use a origin point as the center of the circle. Instead of using XYZ, we can also use 0, 0, 0 to denote the point at the origin point. So plug that into C. Normal, we'll leave it as a default value of pointing along z-axis. Radius, we'll do 20. So I have a circle with a radius of 20. I would like to copy this circle along the z-axis, make a 20 of them with 5 as its interval, floor to floor height, maybe you can imagine. So to do that, I can use the move battery, move it along z-axis. But this way I only create one. So to copy a list of circles, we can use either series or range. But in this case, we'll use range. For the domain, we'll use construct domain from 0 to 100 and use that as domain. And let's create 20 of the circles. And now I have a value from 0, 5, 10, 15, and so on all the way to 100. And if I plug in this list of numbers to z-axis, I can create 20 circles along z-axis by moving the original circle. Now I can scale these circles. By default, it scales along the origin point. As you can see that it all become half of its original size based on the original point. If I want to scale along each of those circles, I need to use the centroid of the circles. To do that, use the area component The area components calculates the area of each circle at the same time, provides the centroid of the geometry. So we can use that. And you can see that all of the circles are scaled based on the original center of the circle. For scaling factor, if we give one single value, this would uniformly scale all of the circles at the same rate. So in this case, instead of using the uniform value, we can use graph mapper, plug in this range of values into the graph mapper. But the problem is that in graph mapper, the domains are always from 0 to 1 on the x-axis and 0 to 1 on the y-axis. So since this list of numbers is 0 to 100, we need to remap it to 0 to 1. So we can use a remap function, remap these values, and the source domain would be 0 to 100. The target domain would be 0 to 1. And that's what we need as the input value of the graph mapper. Now this remap will turn the list of values from 0 to 1 based on the original interval. So let's use Bezier, and let's just plug this into the factor. You can already see that there's change based on this. When this battery turned into red, that means there's an error. The reason for that is the first number is 0, so a circle cannot be scaled to 0, and it doesn't like it. Let's move this slightly bit upwards. Now you can see that because I moved the first value from 0 to about 0.1, and this battery does not complain anymore. Now I can change the shape of it. For example, I can change the first point to 1, and you can see that the bottom is the size of its original circle. And I can lower the endpoint, make it smaller. I can change the profile to better visualize it. I'll hide all these circles, also hide the center point. And you can see that how the shape of the profiles is determined by the graph mapper. And to better visualize the shape, we can use loft to loft all the curves to make a surface like that. Now, if you change the shape, you can better visualize the shape you want.